G'day and welcome to the Head Shepherd podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO at Next Gen Agri. At the Head Shepherd podcast, we focus on all things livestock through the stories of the people that farm them and the people that study them and work with them on a daily basis. We get to work in amazing locations like I am today at Glenthorne Station here in the South Island of New Zealand. At Next Gen Agri, our tagline is farming in our hearts, science in our heads. And we live that out every day, and you'll certainly hear that coming out in the Head Shepherd podcast. Before we start today's episode, I really do want to thank again Allflex, our sponsors, and now the MSD team for continuing to support our podcast. It really is fantastic to have such a great collaboration, and the combined forces is pretty exciting for Australasian agriculture. The science of healthier animals through ID and through the animal health products like the Cooper's range, which is an MSD product that we might be more familiar with. Fantastic to have such a close alignment with those two companies now. Just really exciting to continue Head Shepherd. We've gone past our 50 episodes. We're into season 5 now. Fantastic to see the podcast continue to grow. Thank you to all those that continue to support us and give us feedback. It's really is awesome. We better get on with the show. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. Really excited this week to have Sarah Nolet. Sarah's the co-founder at AgThentic, CEO at AgThentic, and a great friend of mine. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me, Ferg.
Awesome to have you along. I think this podcast is probably your fault. I started this podcast based on the fact that you had a podcast and it seemed like a bit of fun. So in the height of COVID last year, I decided I'd have a crack. So thanks for that inspiration.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. I'm sure you're a more successful podcaster than I am now, getting podcast famous, which is always good. So no, it's been great to see it come to life and listen to a few episodes, catch up with farmers around the world. So it's been awesome.
Cool. So I guess we normally start with a bit of background, and by your accent, people will be guessing that you're not from Australia or New Zealand, but have spent a fair bit of time in Australia and sort of building up AgThentic. But what's the story? What's Sarah Nolet?
Yeah, so I am not Australian. I grew up in California, actually, and in the tech world, so in Silicon Valley, pretty proper Silicon Valley, sort of 10 minutes from Google and Facebook kind of deal, so a pretty crazy place to grow up. I ended up going out to the East Coast of the U.S. for school, for college, or university, I should speak more Australian, and studied computer science. Ended up in the defense industry building software to find bad guys, so military intelligence analysis systems, which was definitely not anything I expected to be doing. Got sort of tired of that after a few years. The tech was exciting, but I just didn't care about the sort of overarching mission in a way that I wanted to get up and work hard every day. Ended up going to South America on a holiday that turned into a gap year and sort of fell into agriculture as I was living on farms over there, and just got really hooked, and it connected a few dots for me. I had been an athlete my whole life, so I sort of cared about food, and we have a hobby farm in California that I spent time on in my teens, and sort of made all the equipment my dad was trying to fix make sense once I saw what it was actually meant to be used for, and just got really excited about agriculture and went down the rabbit hole, and that was about 10 years ago, and in particular like ag tech, so the new forms of technology and new types of capital, venture capital, and sort of innovation money coming into agriculture in a new way really piqued my interest and connected a lot of dots for me in terms of my background and tech in Silicon Valley, and was, I thought, part of what the future of agriculture would look like. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Came to Australia 6 years ago. For personal reasons. My other half got a job here, and I got lucky in getting to come over and live on the beach for a bit. And then really Australia was great at agriculture and great at agricultural research, but there wasn't much in the way of commercialization, and that was something I had been working on and knew something about. So that was the beginning of AgThentic. Cool.
So AgThentic today is you've joined forces with none other than Matthew Pryor and a team around you now. But
that's right. Yeah.
So where are we at today?
Yeah, so we're a team of 7, 8 7, I think. And we have 2 parts of the business. We have the advisory part of the business, where we help corporates and governments and investors to think about and get involved with the future of technology in agriculture. So that's global and all across the value chain. So we would do work in, just this year in everything from cotton to red meat to alternative proteins, so all kind of areas of food and ag. And then we've got an investment arm as well, so we invest in early stage startups, all in the AgTech space, and again, all along the value chain. Those are predominantly in Australia. So we've made 8 investments so far in different startups, and then sitting around all of that is our podcast and blogs and all the content stuff that has been great to tell stories about what we do.
Yeah, no doubt there is some AgTech So What, or plenty of AgTech So What listeners listening to this. So it will obviously put the link to all that stuff in the show notes, so people can find you if they haven't already. They probably, most people I talk to are already listening, but maybe there's some out there that haven't hit yet. But I guess the AgTech space when you first moved 6 years ago would have been a bit of a desert, and where are we at today in terms of innovation happening in Australia and I guess Australasian agriculture?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Innovation in ag's been happening for a long time, and Australia and New Zealand have been leaders in that for lots of reasons. But the pathway of startups that are funded by risk capital and really taking a big crack at it is pretty new for this part of the world in tech generally, and then increasingly in ag tech. So, 5 years ago, I remember speaking at a conference, and even the idea of an ag tech conference, people didn't really know what it was, like who would go, who would be there, why would you be there? It just wasn't really a term that people were using. And then talking about startups that were raising a bunch of money from Google Ventures or these investors who didn't know anything about ag and were building software and talking about machine learning and robotics, like it was all pretty new. And I remember being asked, do we need a fund here? Do we need money to come in Australia alone and back startups here? And I was like, no, there's not enough deal flow here. There aren't enough good innovations. We've got a long way to go to build the ecosystem and make sure there are enough good investment opportunities for the kind of shots on goal you need. And then a couple of years later, I had to sort of eat my socks, and because I was going to raise a fund and I didn't believe there was enough deal flow, and we should actually have our own fund here. And that's really because the whole space grew exponentially over that time period, with a lot of support from government and industry, and also just new talent coming into this space saying, hey, I think we can make a difference in what the future of farming systems look like and bring in new kinds of technology. So it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, indeed. I guess for those out there, what's the traditional sort of pathway of innovation has been collect some levies from some growers, match it with a bit of government money, put some scientists, do some research for a decade or so, and then maybe someone thinks about sort of working out how we could commercially apply that. I guess the new way is turn that on its head, really. Talk to the people of the problem, and then sort of find a solution back down the other way, rather than sort of come up with random solutions that might not have a problem yet.
Yeah, exactly. You can criticize the tech world for maybe being a little too heavy on the tech sometimes and saying, I've built this widget, why don't the farmers buy it? And I get that. It's really frustrating, and we've seen too much of that. So I'm not saying that this new model is, always good or the only model. But yeah, in contrast to start at the research end and focus on building the thing first and then figuring out if anyone wants it. This world starts with what are the problems and how might we solve them, and let's take the smallest bite at the apple possible to start solving that problem, and then build it up over time as we gain confidence that it really is solving the problem. And that's the power of software, right? Especially that's kind of where this world's come from, is you can release a new version, you can get a new iteration out there and build new features, and can iterate really quickly, can build new versions and add more value and solve more parts of the problem. And that's really the power of this model.
Yeah, cool. What are you, you're obviously making very important decisions about which companies that you invest in, and I don't know what that process looks like, but it'll be a long and thorough. What is the sort of criteria of companies that you would think consider to put in your portfolio?
Yeah, so it's crazy. I'm in California right now and have been talking to some investors about how things are moving so quickly here, and there's so much money in the market that people are having to make investment decisions in 48 hours. And so I feel like a dinosaur because we're way slower than that. But, I think it's also part of being responsible and being a sector specialist fund. Like, we only invest in ag, then we really want to know something about the space, and if we don't, then do the work to figure it out. So the way we think about it is called like opportunity. So is the market big enough? Who are the competition? Who are the customers going to be? What problems do they have? And then the company. So how do they actually solve that problem? Who's their team? What technology do they have? How are they going to make money? And then the deal itself. So are the terms suitable for our mandate? How much money are they raising? What are they going to do with it? Who else is investing? That kind of thing. So we kind of go through opportunity and company and deal and ultimately get to a decision. We think probably more than others about team. We invest really early, so they might not have all of the product built. They might not have a bunch of revenue, and so we're not doing a bunch of spreadsheet analysis on projected cash flows because they just might not have that yet, and so it's all a guess. So then we look a lot at, how is the team tried to and hopefully succeeded in figuring out what the real problems are, and do they really understand the customer and how the industry works and how they're going to make money, because again, we've seen too much focus on the technology and the IP and who owns it, and probably not enough on what's it actually going to do and who's going to pay for it.
Yeah, cool. And so you've invested in quite a range of companies: blockchain, insect proteins, insect getting rid of waste, whole heap of different stuff, alternative proteins, robotics. It's quite a range in the portfolio.
Yes, it is. There's never a boring day. I literally will spend a day talking to farmers about how they're thinking about, objective carcass data feedback coming back and what's that going to mean, and then talking about vertical integration, and then jumping ship to talk about algae farms and what are they going to do and where do they exist and what kinds of enzymes are going to be in them, and does that go into burgers or animal feed, and then jumping again to alternative proteins and how does the extrusion machine work and how are you going to sell it online and at what kind of and color box. Like, there's really never a dull moment.
No, that's not everyone's day, I'm sure. One of the programs that was, I think, your brainchild, or at least the team's brainchild, was Farmers to Founders, and that's a program I'm a little bit involved with way back, and probably how we met, or somewhere along those lines. I guess for those out there, I saw a round open at the moment, I think through AWI maybe. So anyone who's sort of interested in this space, what does that program offer, and why should they get involved?
Yeah, so that is how we met, Ferg. The original version was through MLA, and the vision is pretty much stayed the same around producers being part of innovation as more than just customers. There's a lot of talk out there around, these laggards, they're not adopting, or why aren't producers getting more involved? And our belief was always that we need to start with the user and start with the problem and get producers more involved. So that was what led to Farmers to Founders, and was a series of innovation programs for producers to get involved if they had an idea, if they wanted to get access to more technology. We actually decided late last year, early this year, to divest our share in that business. So we don't run Farmers to Founders anymore. We're not involved with it anymore. Really because one of the things we tell our startups, and it would be true of anyone running a farming business, I'm sure, although that's not my area of expertise or place I should give advice, so caveat there, it is focus, right? Like, you can only do so many things, and you're always limited by how many hours you have in a day. And so Matthew, my business partner, and I looked at each other and said, all right, we're trying to run 3 businesses. We're doing the advisory work. We're running the fund and making these investments. We've got the podcast. And then we're also running this Farmers to Founders business in partnership with another business. And it was just too much. And we said we can't do right by our clients and our investors trying to do too many things. So we decided to divest our share in Farmers to Founders. And that has continued to run on and be successful. But we're no longer involved. We're just cheering from the sidelines.
Excellent. Probably should do my research properly before we run these interviews, but
that's all right. I wouldn't have expected you to.
You used to be involved with it. That's all good.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess you know a lot about what's coming down the line in terms of AgTech. Is there, I don't know, what's the most exciting thing that's about to hit Australasian agriculture?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put a call out there if I can. Just we have made 2 investments in the alternative protein space, and we want to make an investment in the livestock space, and we haven't seen one yet. And I think Australia and New Zealand are such a world-class place to be innovating around livestock. And so anyone who's working on ideas in that space, please come talk to us, because we do want to be investing in that area and see it as part of, sustainability and climate solutions. One of the things we have been talking about a lot recently is remote sensing and how good satellites are getting at collecting data. And I just think it's fascinating for agriculture, because we've kind of lived in this world of being able to say, oh, you don't need to know what's happening on my farm, or, what I do here is my own business. And when we've got satellites that can collect data down at the, couple centimeter levels, that conversation's pretty much over. And that sounds scary in some ways, and I think it is in some ways, but it's also an opportunity to not have to deal with all the manual ways we collect data now, and be able to unlock some serious power of analytics. And so that's, just what future does that create when we've got that kind of imagery? I know it's something you've thought a bit about, so that's one we're pretty excited about, and lots of open questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't know what the numbers are, but there's swarms of satellites getting launched. So I saw my first swarm farm tractor bog the other day in a paddock. That's one of your portfolio companies. Obviously, Robotics is it's not the only tractor I've seen bogged in the paddock this year. There's lots of tractors bogged this year, so that's inevitably going to happen. But obviously, Robotics is a big part of our future.
Yeah, I mean, we think it is, and there's a bunch of ways it'll happen, right? Partial, taking something that's not autonomous and adding a bit of smarts to it so it can run partially autonomously, or all the way to a full robot doing tasks. And Swarm Farms, I think, a good example of how we think about it, because it's like, what can autonomy unlock? Like, yes, you can do a job without a person, or yes, you can do this thing a little bit differently and save some time. But when you have autonomy, you can kind of open up whole new ways of farming. So one of the examples is with something like precision or like spot spraying for weed management. It's pretty tough to think about driving really slowly and putting that kit on and spraying. Like, you're just going to go out and spray, right? And so when you've got a robot that can do it, then it makes it a lot easier to just go out and spray slowly and with a camera that finds the weed and only sprays the weed. Yeah, okay, people are doing that now, but what about when you've got a piece of kit that goes on the back of that robot that mechanically chips away at the weed, or a microwave that goes on the back of it that zaps the weed seed bank before it emerges? And so you get into this future of farming in pretty different ways than we do now, and all of that is unlocked by autonomy. And so that kind of digital transformation, to use some tech jargon, is what we spend a lot of time thinking about, and how autonomy will unlock that and what it might look like.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting part for me, is that future where you've got, really essentially what we would now call organic, or really sort of where you've got one person milling away and doing something really, really specialist and producing this food that somebody loves. We'll be able to open that up at massive scale through robotics. So it's sort of like where we've had to do that with chemicals and large scale equipment and stuff, and that's obviously becoming less and less kosher in the world, and the opportunity for robotics to really prepare food, produce animals' food, whatever, in a really safe and environmentally sustainable, friendly, all that sort of stuff is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of comes back full circle to what we were talking about before, Ferg, where some of what we invest in is software, and a lot of venture capitalists only invest in software. We believe that in agriculture especially, like, you have to have a hardware component to many things, because you are talking about physical animals and plants and supply chains and goods that have to move around and stuff that can't kill people because it needs to be safe and produce well. And so that means investing in hardware. And so we end up sort of in agriculture rooms being like weird because we're doing tech and using all these buzzwords, and then in venture capital rooms being weird because we talk about animals and hardware and all this stuff that they sort of hate. So that ends up making us a little bit unique, but that's definitely the fun part of what we do and where we see the opportunities.
Yeah, big time. And as someone who's trying to invest in hardware at the moment, it's certainly the most painful. It's certainly has caused me no end of grief. But anyway, it's you do, unfortunately, no one's out there building stuff that does work on farms in the way that we need it to work. So you kind of got to roll up your sleeves and get into it.
Yeah, and going back to like the ecosystem point, that's sort of where we're at, is we have to go through some of those hard yards ourselves, and people like you and many others laying that groundwork to get some of the basic capabilities, whether it's connectivity through satellites or kit that can be in a paddock and work. You know, we haven't had that yet, and we're on the brink of having that at costs that make sense. And so it's exciting times ahead now that we're starting to get there.
Cool. So how far away from closing around, or have you? That's all. Oh, you've closed around,
yeah, so,
but you're just investing now.
Yeah, that's right. So we raised the first fund, so we closed that off at $35 million. We'll make about 15, invest in about 15 companies out of that fund. We just approved our 8th, maybe our 9th and 10th here coming up soon. So it just seems crazy. It's flown by. You know, we spent so much time thinking about what it would be like to be able to invest in these companies, and now like almost 2/3 of the way through. So yeah, that probably will mean a second fund sometime in the future, and we're starting to think about, you know, what that would be like. Really, we want to earn the right to be able to have those conversations, because we want to prove out the impact and return potential of the investments we have made. And you know, these things take time, and it's been going really well, and so we're excited to be able to start talking more about that in the future.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, yeah, we were sitting around somewhere when it was very early embryonic stages of the conversation, and it was all just in the head with maybe a name for it. That was about it, and now it's real. It's so cool.
Yeah, you saw, I mean, literally some of the like whiteboard or like pieces of giant construction paper with Post-its on it that I'm sure were ridiculous. Actually, I remember, you might not remember this, Ferg, but sitting at a kitchen table of a farmer, and we were really excited about having farmers involved, and you sort of helped me to tee up this moment where they asked me, oh, well, you know, if I was thinking about ag tech, what should I do? Which like should have been the perfect question for like, here's the pitch of how you could get involved with us, right? And I just so completely bobbled it. I just remember like talking in some circle about like ag tech and the future and innovation, and you being like, why have I brought this human to this dinner table? Like, she's such an idiot, I'm sure. And this poor grower was like, oh, interesting. So Ferg, the weather, like it's just complete subject change. So I have you to thank for some of those early conversations that helped me to actually be able to talk about what we do in ways that make sense.
Luckily, I have no recollection of that moment. So
there might have been wine or beer involved, possibly. I'm not sure.
Small chance if you and I were both there. Yeah. Awesome. No, it's fantastic to hear your success there, and yeah, we're looking forward to one day we'll actually get face to face and catch up again. It's been a tough, interesting couple of years, but anyway, that's for everybody. So yeah, no, all the very best with AgThentic. Looking forward to it, to the major play it's going to have in Australia and world agriculture in the future.
That's the plan. Thank you so much, and congrats on the podcast and all the work you do. I'm sure we'll talk about it more soon.
Cheers. Thank you.